The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendation or investment or tax advice. Always consult with your investment and tax professional before making important decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member, FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Punturo Financial Services, Inc., and Bernstein and Punturo LLP are not affiliated.
Hi, this is CPA and Certified Financial Planner Rick Punturo. For over 20 years, I've guided and built a roadway for my clients to reach their financial goals. Whether long or short term, wealth building or legacy planning, my clients have learned to better understand their tolerance for risk and how to achieve financial independence. Please contact me by visiting PunturoFinancial.com. That's PunturoFinancial.com, or call 631-694-5645. As a CPA and financial planner, I am able to offer what other financial advisors cannot: tax advice and how your investments may affect your tax liabilities. Please contact me today by visiting PunturoFinancial.com. That's PunturoFinancial.com, or call 631-694-5645. That's 631-694-5645. Together, let's get your investments in shape to achieve financial fitness. This is CPA and Certified Financial Planner Rick Punturo of Punturo Financial Services and Bernstein and Punturo. I can be reached at telephone 631-694-5645 or visit my website at PunturoFinancial.com. We are conveniently located in Melville, New York. I am your host of the Punturo Financial Fitness Show. Be sure to listen in every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. right here at 1039 LI News Radio. Today's show, we will speak about the divorce process and the best practices to follow in this unfortunate life event that has the potential to cause not just emotional devastation, but also financial hardship if not planned properly. Planning counts, folks. Planning counts. Virtually all of our listeners have experienced, either firsthand or from the view of a loved one, the emotional and financial challenges associated with the D word, divorce, right? It is advisable to meet with a competent matrimonial attorney, CPA, and certified financial planner to address the most graceful way to plan asset and income splitting between spouses. Michael, right?
Absolutely.
Graceful ways, right? This speaks to financial fitness, with the goal for my clients to accomplish this in the most tax efficient and economical manner. The core of any financial plan, folks, is a cash flow analysis and the statement of net worth, assets and liabilities, must be carefully prepared in a detailed manner to ensure that the proposed divorce settlement is structured in the most effective manner. My guest today is Michael Freed, a litigation partner in the Matrimonial and Family Law firm of Berkman, Botker, Newman, and Shine, with offices in New York City, Westchester, and right here on Long Island, right? The firm provides 3 ways of resolving matrimonial disputes, either by mediation, collaborative law, or litigation. Michael is a fellow of the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, which is a national group of matrimonial lawyers who passed a rigorous national and state written examination. Michael frequently lectures on topics of matrimonial and family law and hosts his own web show, 5 Minutes with Freed, which is broadcast each and every Tuesday morning on his LinkedIn page and replayed a month later on his 5 Minutes with Freed Facebook group page. Michael is someone you can trust to have the highest level of competence and always acts in the best interest of his clients. So Michael, enough about this distinguished background that you have. Wonderful background. And I've seen your story in action. You're quite remarkable in how you work with your clients. But let's walk through. I refer you a client, Michael, or a friend refers a friend of a friend, or a referral comes in, and they're meeting with you for the first time. Can you walk through your discovery process and how that works?
Absolutely, Rick. And first, I want to say thank you so much for inviting me to your show. It's really an honor to be here. So, yeah, a client comes to me for an initial consultation, and they want to know, what do I do? How do I prepare for this meeting? Well, the first thing I tell them is make a list of questions. And there is never a question that is too silly or that doesn't make sense. I just tell them give whatever questions they have. Then I tell them to gather documents. What documents? 3 years of tax returns, a year's worth of financial statements, be it checking account statements, savings accounts, brokerage account statements, retirement account statements, so that at least I can go through that with them. And certainly you as a financial advisor can help that client prepare those documents to give them the information necessary to help me.
That's right. Those documents are critical. And, you know, our financial planning clients have the financial plan. So we'll be able to give, as we have, detailed assets and liability statements. And it's important to know who owns what. And, you know, and then, you know, based on marriage, right, it's also based on when the assets came into play, whose assets were they, et cetera. And, you know, through that process, you know, you begin to learn more about your client, right? So what else? So what's an inappropriate question, Michael? Come on. You have to, I want to beat the heck out of my spouse. I want to blah, 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 right?
Well, there are some questions they ask in terms of hiding money. What do I do? You know, how can I, do things that my spouse won't see anything? And what I tell them in terms of finances is that everything is discoverable, and there's nothing, you're basically an open book, and there's nothing that you can really hide because the other side's entitled to see all of the bank statements and all other financial information from the date of marriage up until the start of a divorce. So there's no question, like we were talking about, there's no question that I wouldn't answer for a client when it comes to that. But what's important, the reason I ask for all these statements is because ultimately they're going to prepare what's called a statement of net worth. Now, the statement of net worth is the most crucial document that a client's going to prepare and sign. It's a sworn document. So that's why it's important that it's done precise and it's done perfectly.
So Michael, if I could, in the world of divorce and the government proceeding, et cetera, and the world of divorce, statement of net worth means more than the statement of net worth typically in the financial planning arena. Statement of net worth typically means not assets and liabilities. And you take the differences, that's your worth. Assets minus liabilities equals your net, hence the word net worth, right? But net worth in the legal world also means income and expenses and so on, correct?
That's correct.
It's a more comprehensive definition of net worth, to be fair.
That's correct. And when the statement of net worth is prepared, we figure out what a client's monthly expenses are. We go through all the expenses from the mortgage down to dog food so that we have an idea as to whether we're representing the payee spouse who's going to be receiving support, what they need, or the payor spouse in terms of what they can pay. So we look at income, we look at expenses, assets, and liabilities. And the importance of looking at assets and liabilities, like you referred to earlier, Rick, was when was an asset acquired? Because there's two types of property when we're dealing with property distribution in a divorce in New York. We're looking at marital property and separate property. So marital property is everything that's acquired from the date that you get married up until the start of a divorce action, which is the filing of a summons in the county clerk where you reside. Separate properties, anything that you acquire before the marriage or by gift or inheritance at any time. So marital property goes into the marital pot and it could be distributed, whereas separate property is outside of the marital pot and it is not distributed.
So well said. And some folks think because it's their business they started that the spouse is not entitled to that asset. And in particular, that's a sticky topic, right? The assets of a business that could be, they could fool around with things a little more than a W-2 situation to get a little more acute. And so can you speak to that in the small business arena?
Well, in any asset, the biggest misconception that people have is that, well, title is in my name, so it's not marital. It belongs to me. Well, that's not the case. In New York, title is irrelevant. So you could say, well, I formed a business. It's in my name. My wife doesn't have any interest in it. But it is. If it was acquired during the marriage, it's a marital asset. And then it's really a determination as to what percentage the non-titled spouse would have. And we look at direct versus indirect contributions. Direct contributions, they're working side by side with the titled spouse in the business. Or indirect contributions would mean they don't work within the business, but they take care in terms of being a parent, a spouse, and that's indirect contributions that allow them to work towards allowing that business to prosper. So that's really the difference. The difference being where you have a titled spouse, it really doesn't matter whether it's a titled spouse. There's still good. The non-titled spouse will still have an interest in that asset.
This is true. Everything counts, doesn't it, Michael?
Absolutely.
So we've got to be detail-oriented. All right, folks. So are you listening to the Punturo Financial Fitness Show? We will be taking a short break for commercials. And stay with us. Learn more about divorce. Your friends are relying on you. Hopefully you don't have to go through that. If you were listening to us before the commercial break or just joining us, welcome to the Punturo Financial Fitness Show. Be sure to listen in every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. right here at 103.9 LI News Radio. I'm your host, Rick Punturo, and certified CPA and certified financial planner of Punturo Financial Services and Bernstein Punturo. I am joined today by my guest, attorney Michael Freed, a litigation partner in the Matrimonial and Family Law firm of Berkman, Botker, Newman, and Shine. We are speaking about the divorce process and the best practices to follow for a graceful divorce. Can that be? Before the break, we were talking about distribution of assets of divorce, right? And then before that, we touched upon the process of discovery, meeting with the client, the process of the statement of net worth and what that means, and the extensive definition of statement of net worth to be inclusive of assets and liabilities, in addition, of course, income and expenses. So I think, Michael, why don't we start off talking again, just to reiterate the point that this is a Long Island station, obviously in New York, driven by equitable distribution, and define equitable. Because a lot of folks don't understand what equitable means in this term. So
sure, Rick. So equitable distribution doesn't necessarily mean equal distribution. It's what's equitable and what's fair. And again, when we're talking about assets, and we're talking about bank accounts, we're talking about retirement accounts, businesses as well. These are all assets that can be distributed in New York State in the event of a divorce.
Sure. So if folks are planning, and they think about, hey, listen, this is my asset. This is inheritance. This is an asset that I had before marriage, etc. Talk to us about the exceptions of property assets that could be deemed marital property, and what best practices are to avoid that. This story is not about happily married people, listening in and doing some cheating, but this is just real stuff, and it's practical.
Sure.
So can you speak to that?
Absolutely. So there are assets, like we discussed earlier, that can be deemed as separate property by definition because they're acquired before the marriage. But let's take an example of a house. So the house, in this example, the house was purchased 5 years before the marriage. And during the marriage, that asset now, the house, has increased substantially. Let's say it's increased by $500,000. Now, that increase, that specific increase during the marriage, it could be deemed as marital property, even though the asset itself is separate. But what we look at as matrimonial attorneys is we look to see what type of appreciation do we have. Do we have passive appreciation, or do we have active appreciation? So if we have passive appreciation, that means the market's gone up. So case in point with COVID right now. Houses are going, they're skyrocketing. But if we have an appraisal done between the time of when it was acquired and now, and that appreciation's done, it's increased solely because of the COVID, that's passive appreciation, and that is not distributable. On the flip side, though, active appreciation is what we call a sweat equity. So the titled spouse, maybe during the marriage, put some money, marital money, into the improvements, or he actually did physical labor, and he did that while the non-titled spouse was taking care of the children. So that active appreciation could be deemed as marital property. Now, the question is, when they do the analysis, is what portion caused that appreciation? Was it the passive side or the active side? So that's one of the examples.
So you need an appraisal for that to see what that improvement did before or after. If there was an improvement done by one spouse, then you have to do an evaluation, an appraisal of that property as it relates to that improvement.
And not only that, you may need testimony from that expert as to what portion of that appreciation was it passive or active? So that's one of the examples. And another example, and this happens in your world as well, Rick, when you're dealing with commingling of assets. So here's an example. Before the marriage, you had...
Excuse me, that sounds a little dirty. Commingling of assets. And you're putting my name to it, okay?
Commingling.
As a financial planner, that's critical, yeah.
It's a dirty word in the financial world and in the matrimonial world as well. I can't tell you how many clients have come to me and say, look, I had this before the marriage. Oh, but you're forgetting one detail. During the marriage, you put income that you earned during the marriage into this separate asset, whether it's $1 or $1 million. Once you do that, you taint the account, and that separate asset becomes marital. And look, people don't plan normally for a divorce. They get married, they're thinking everything's great, put everything in joint names, no problem. But there are times in which they'll say, I had this account for 20 years before the marriage. Well, that's all fine and good, but once you start putting marital funds into that account, it loses that separate property nature.
Sure. We do teach our clients, and we work with them to plan for unfortunate events. But divorce is one of the more challenging ones to meet with clients, a couple, and talk about that process. But it's something that should be talked about.
Well, Rick, the other thing that you can help me as a financial advisor is working with your clients to say, okay, well now, what's important is you had this account all these years, keep that account separate. And also make sure that if you're going to open, use those funds, put it in a separate account.
Well said. So let's talk through prepare what the cash flow statement does in the divorce proceeding and how critical that, I said, is the core of financial planning, and it's the core of any process, any event, and so much so when it relates to divorce, where you have a lot of trauma to that financial planning process. Financial fitness becomes a challenge. Could you speak to the cash flow statement?
Well, first of all, you are my lifeline when it comes to that, because you are the person that helps me. I'm just an attorney. I am not a financial advisor. And when I look at this cash flow, I'm not just looking in year one. I'm looking, when I have a non-moneyed spouse, what's going to happen in 5 years, in 10 years? And you're the person, Rick, that could really help me with that, because we're looking into inflation. We're looking at when you get a distributive award, which is an award of equitable distribution, and it's invested over time. Well, how long can somebody live off of that, live off the interest? Or do they have to pull some of the principal out? So these are the things that I'm looking for assistance from somebody who's well experienced like you are, to give me that help so that I could inform my clients, well, look, this is a good deal, but what's going to happen is after 5 or 10 years, that principal is going to start to drop, and how are you going to live?
So that's a critical component of any financial plan. But ever so important when you're talking about divorce. You're talking about possibly 2 houses, talking about more expenses, and you don't necessarily have more revenue. So it's critically important that we roll this out, frankly, to date of death. I mean, for some of our clients, we got to see, what are you going to do to make this work, to be sustainable, to to be able to retire and to be able to, take care of your expenses. So I can't underestimate the importance of doing this before the settlement. If you do it after the settlement, then there's not many things that you can change. You might want to increase the settlement with respect to the number of years and reduce the amount based on taxability, based on a number of factors, and based on the spending habits of one client.
Well, and also, Rick, what's important is you're saying, before settling a case, Rick, I need you in the beginning, I need you in the middle, and I need you in the end of a case, because we're always planning. From the day that a client comes into my office, I'm looking at how do I best protect their interests, whether it be, working out more in terms of support, or maybe more in terms of a distributive award, in terms of taxability. There's all different facets. It's very complex, and that's why I need somebody like you to really help me.
And that's why I need somebody like you, who's a competent attorney that always acts in the best interest. Michael, I have to thank you, gentleman and scholar, and very bright, and a great guy, Michael. Thank you for shedding some light for our listeners to the ever-present financial and emotional topic of divorce. This is CPA and Certified Financial Planner Rick Punturo, and thank you for listening to the Punturo Financial Fitness Show.
Discussions in this show should not be construed as specific recommendation or investment or tax advice. Always consult with your investment and tax professional before making important decisions. Securities offered through registered representatives of Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., a broker-dealer member, FINRA SIPC. Advisory services through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc., a registered investment advisor. Cambridge and Punturo Financial Services, Inc., and Bernstein and Punturo LLP are not affiliated.
The views and opinions expressed on this program are not necessarily those of this station, JVC Broadcasting Management, or its sponsors.